Welcome to Evolving Brain. This lesson is module number 2, Introduction to the Brain. Your learning journal indicates a travel excursion, Intro to Neuroscience. The stops along the journey will enhance your learning in what is hopefully a fun way for identification and assessments of students with autism spectrum disorder, known as ASD. In addition, your journey will answer the question, does the brain recover from injury? Well, are you packed and ready to go? When you complete this exciting journey, you should easily be able to identify areas of the brain, describe functions of each brain area, match brain areas with functions, and explain how brain damage or disease impacts the daily life on areas impacted. The parietal lobe is near the back and top of the head. The primary functions are process visual attention, touch perception, and goal-directed voluntary movements, such as eye-hand coordination. The occipital lobe is near the back of the head. The primary functions are process visual perception, how we process the information we take in with our eyes. The cerebellum is in the back of the head near the base of the skull. The primary functions are coordination of voluntary movement, balance, and equilibrium. If you have balance issues like I do, this is the area of the brain responsible. The frontal lobe is near the front of the head, right under the forehead. The primary functions are consciousness, how we know what we are doing, initiating activity, and making judgments. The temporal lobe is on the side of the head, above the ears. The primary functions are hearing perception, how we process the information we receive with our ears. The brainstem is deep inside the brain and leads directly to the spinal cord. The primary functions are controls involuntary bodily functions like heart rate, swallowing, reflexes, and digestion. Wow! We have visited many areas inside the brain. Let's put it all together and answer the question, how does damage or disease to an area of the brain impact daily life? If the frontal lobe is responsible for consciousness, initiating activity, and making judgments, damage to this area would potentially render a person unconscious or able to initiate activity. The temporal lobe is responsible for hearing perception, processing memory, conceptual development, and facial recognition. Damage to this area would potentially render a person unable to perceive sounds, recognize faces, and/or they may develop amnesia. The parietal lobe is responsible for visual attention, touch perception, and hand-eye coordination. Damage to this area would potentially render a person without ability to perceive touch or lack hand-eye coordination. The occipital lobe is responsible for visual perception, processing information received through sight. Damage to this area would potentially render a person visually challenged or possibly blind. The brainstem is responsible for heart rate, swallowing, and reflexes like digestion. Damage to this area would potentially render a person unable to regulate heart rate, unable to swallow, or unable to digest food. The cerebellum is responsible for voluntary movements, balance, equilibrium. Damage to this area would potentially render a person unable to stand, walk, or get out of bed without assistance. The good and evolving news. Can the brain heal after being injured? Most studies suggest that once brain cells are destroyed or damaged, for the most part, they do not regenerate. However, recovery after brain injury can take place, especially in younger people, as in some cases, other areas of the brain make up for the injured tissue. In other cases, the brain learns to reroute information and function around the damaged areas. The exact amount of recovery is not predictable at the time of injury and may be unknown for months or even years. Each brain injury and rate of recovery is unique. Recovery from a severe brain injury often involves a prolonged or lifelong process of treatment and rehabilitation. Congratulations! You have reached your stop for Module Number 2. Hopefully this excursion has laid a firm foundation for your continued study of neuroscience, the brain, and a further understanding of how students impacted by ASD, autism spectrum disorder, may learn and or present in a variety of manners, depending on the area of the brain impacted by the disease. Knowing the specific areas of the brain and subsequent functions brings a firm knowledge of how areas of the brain damaged by injury or disease impact the daily lives of the person, plus their families, friends, teachers, classmates, and others in the community. Armed with this knowledge, we are all better prepared to provide the best experience for everyone.